Welcome ladies, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters and aunties, friends and our male supporters to this year's online Pink Breakfast event. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you are all staying well and safe during these unprecedented times.
We are privileged in our community to have the opportunity to give and have the power and ability to support those who are suffering and to help them survive.
The funds we raise today support targeted breast cancer research done by the Jewish Women's Breast Cancer Network and the National Breast Cancer Foundation, and work towards a goal of stopping deaths for breast cancer and improving quality of life for all those impacted. It is very clear that this isn't the pink breakfast that we had all planned and hoped for. What's interesting though is that usually the pink breakfast falls in the month of Adar, during the story of Purim and the strength of Queen Esther. Although the pink breakfast isn't taking place during this time, the values and messages from the month of Adar resonate with us today.
Queen Esther is the epitome of a strong female who felt the need to stand up and overcome obstacles during a difficult time. All the women here today reflect these exact values: strength in the face of adversity. A real message that we want to get across today is the importance of being vulnerable.
Although being vulnerable can be interpreted through so many lenses, today we interpret vulnerability as feeling empowered to use your voice and share your experiences and knowledge.
Today we are inspired by and thank the incredible women who have come to share their stories and be vulnerable with us. Using the strength of Esther and the importance of vulnerability, may we all instill these values in our lives to be empathetic, listen, and be there for each other, and ultimately use our strengths.
We are really fortunate to have two amazing speakers today. Our first speaker is Dr. Leslie Andrews. After completing several degrees in genetics, she joined the first hereditary cancer clinic and is now the head of the department, providing care for families at risk of inherited cancer.
Leslie is an expert cancer genetics specialist, and today will be discussing with us some vital testing she does with her team for the Jewish community. We are so grateful to have her join us here today.
Many of the ladies viewing today may have heard you or your colleague Nicole Cousins speak before, but for those who haven't, can you tell us how the BRCA genes are related to the risk of developing breast cancer or ovarian cancer?
In most cases, breast cancer, which is a common disease unfortunately, occurs in women who are getting older. But in some women it occurs in younger ages, and for some of those women it's occurred because they've inherited a fault in a cancer protection gene. All of our cells have genes in them. When the cell starts to behave abnormally, those genes come into play to correct the mistake and make sure that the cells keep growing at the appropriate rate. If you've got a faulty BRCA gene, it means you've lost one of your cancer protection mechanisms. It doesn't mean that you're going to definitely get cancer. It just means if a cell starts to grow abnormally, you don't have the same capacity to correct that mistake, and you're more likely for a cancer to occur. Some genes protect us against certain types of cancer. So the BRCA genes are the ones that protect women against breast and ovarian cancer, and to a certain extent are protective for men in terms of prostate and sometimes pancreas cancer.
How does being Jewish change your risk of having BRCA gene fault?
There are literally hundreds of different faults in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, and they're found in communities all around the world. But the thing is, with being Jewish, it's like being part of a large family. So Jewish people, particularly Ashkenazi Jews, have lots of the same gene faults and not many of others. Now, across the world, about 1 in 300 people will have a faulty BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene. But unfortunately, within the Ashkenazi Jewish community, about 1 in 40 people, both men and women, will have a faulty BRCA1 or 2 gene. And these are 3 specific faults that have been handed down from generation to generation. In fact, one of these gene faults can be traced back to before the destruction of the Second Temple and is actually found in all Jewish communities throughout the world, but seems to be more predominant amongst Ashkenazim. One of the other gene faults is actually a European gene fault that we find in other, particularly Eastern European Jewish community, European communities, are not just Jewish communities, but seems to have come into the Ashkenazi community. And the third fault, the gene fault in BRCA2 that is more common amongst Jewish people, was probably first arisen in the Jewish community around 1200, and that's particularly found in the Ashkenazi community.
So who should be tested for BRCA gene fault and how can they be tested?
Look, if you come from a Jewish background, if you have even one Jewish grandparent, essentially everyone should be tested. There has been a large study done in the London Jewish community looking at offering genetic testing for the BRCA gene faults to anyone of Jewish ancestry. And they found that half of the people who turned up with a faulty gene had no family history of breast or ovarian cancer and no reason to think that they would carry a faulty gene. In many cases, that was because it might have been inherited through a male line, and so there hadn't been women to develop breast or ovarian cancer. But also in some cases, it was just that there wasn't family history available. And that's really important in Australia because we have the highest proportion of Holocaust survivors and their descendants of any country outside of Israel. And so many people in our community don't have a family history. They don't know what their parents or grandparents died from, either because they lost contact with different relatives going to different parts of the world after the Holocaust, or sadly because they just didn't have any relatives because of the effect of the Holocaust.
Is genetic testing expensive?
Genetic testing has become cheaper and cheaper dramatically over the last decade or so due to advances in technology. So the test itself is now, if you went to a private laboratory, the test would cost about $250 for you to be tested for those 3 specific gene faults, and probably more like about $500-600 if you wanted to be tested for any possible gene fault in the BRCA1 or 2 genes. However, the government, through the public hospital system, will offer testing where there is a significant risk of finding a gene fault at no cost to the patient. So if that's someone who has already had a cancer diagnosis and has Jewish ancestry, or someone who perhaps might be at high risk of having a different kind of cancer gene, that testing, if based on their family history, will be covered by the public hospital system. But in terms of offering genetic testing to the entire Jewish community, that's not covered by our public hospital system. And so 3 years ago, we set up a program called Gene Screen. That's Gene Screen with a J. And that's to provide genetic testing for these 3 specific faults of the BRCA1 and 2 genes that are common in the Jewish community at no cost to the person having the testing. In Sydney, that test is done by people going online and answering some questions to make sure that they really understand the implications of genetic testing. And so they complete a consent form online, and we mail them out a cheek swab. They mail the cheek swab back to us, and then we provide them with their result. Most people will get a negative result, meaning they don't have one of these 3 gene faults. But if they've indicated on the questionnaire that they have a family history of cancer that warrants them being assessed further, or if they do have a faulty gene, or if they happen to be a small number of people that for our processes we ask them to come in, we will offer them an appointment at the clinic. And if they are found to have a faulty gene, then we give them the same care through the public hospital system that we would provide for anyone else. So essentially at the moment, anyone of Jewish ancestry can be tested for free.
How does having BRCA gene fault affect insurance?
We're really lucky in Australia that our private health insurance is not risk-based. That means if you are at higher risk of having a health issue, you don't have to pay a higher premium, which is very different to, say, countries like the United States. So it doesn't affect your ability or the cost of private health insurance at all. With regard to insurance products such as income protection or life insurance policies, until July last year, you had to reveal the results of any genetic testing if you were getting a new insurance policy. From the 1st of July last year, all the insurance providers in Australia have agreed that they will not use genetic test results in assessing someone's risk and therefore the cost of their policies or their ability to get insurance. They won't use genetic test results providing that it is life insurance under $500,000 or total incapacity up to $4,000 a month. So for reasonable insurance policies, genetic testing won't need to be revealed.
What can be done if a woman finds she has the BRCA gene fault?
We've got 3 ways of approaching how people deal with increase of risk. The first is screening. So screening doesn't stop a cancer from coming, but what it does do is that it means that the cancer is more likely to be detected earlier, which may mean that the treatment needs to be less intensive, and also it means that the outcome from that cancer is likely to be better if it's detected at an earlier stage. So for women at high risk of breast cancer, then they have a breast MRI between the ages of 30 and 40, and between 40 and 50 they have an MRI and a mammogram, and after 50 a mammogram and ultrasound, and that's done every year. There unfortunately is no good screening test for ovarian cancer. It's the type of cancer that by the time any test is abnormal, it's already quite advanced, and so doing a screening test every year doesn't improve the outcome. The second thing we do is talk to women about medication that might reduce their risk of cancer, and we know that medications that have been used in the treatment of breast cancer are also useful in the prevention of or risk reduction. Drugs such as tamoxifen, for example, may lower the risk of a woman developing breast cancer if she has a BRCA gene fault. And the third thing is risk reduction with surgery, and that's probably the mainstay for many women, is to remove the breast tissue, these days often keeping their skin and their nipple and having immediate reconstruction. And many women will consider that at some time in their life, not necessarily straight away when they have a genetic test result, but maybe later on when they've completed having their families and as they're getting older, they may consider preventive surgery. As we don't have a screening test or preventive medication for ovarian cancer, we definitely recommend that the ovaries and fallopian tubes be removed once a woman has completed having her children around the age of 40, depending on which gene it is, might be a little earlier or a little later, but around 40 to remove the ovaries and fallopian tubes, and then to replace those missing hormones until the woman would go through her natural menopause.
What does it mean if a man carries the BRCA gene fault?
So men can carry the BRCA gene faults just as frequently as women can, and in fact half of the women that we find with a BRCA gene fault will have in fact inherited it from their father, and that's something that people don't always comprehend and think that only a maternal family history is important. But if a man does carry a BRCA1 gene fault, his risk of prostate cancer is increased somewhat, but generally his cancer risks are not much greater than average. However, the BRCA2 gene fault is associated with a greater risk of prostate cancer, and particularly for men aged between 45 and 60, relative to other men, their risk of prostate cancer is higher. So we recommend that they have an annual blood test called PSA, just to see if their prostate is developing any abnormalities. The other thing is men with a BRCA2 gene fault have about a 6% lifetime risk of developing male breast cancer. Now, we don't do any mammograms or screening for male breast cancer, but we just advise men to be aware that it can occur, and if they felt any abnormalities in their breast area, to have that checked out quickly.
What's new or on the horizon for these women?
I've been working in this field now for over 20 years, and one of the really big advances was the development of a drug that targets cancer cells related to BRCA gene faults, and that has made a huge difference in the outcome of women, particularly those women diagnosed with ovarian cancer, but also has now been used with breast cancer and is being trialled in other cancers in men and women who have BRCA gene faults. So those drugs called PARP, P-A-R-P inhibitors, one of the drug company brands is olaparib, and that's been quite widely used now and with really good results. What's on the horizon is some trials of different medications that might reduce the risk of cancer. It's really amazing to think how these associations develop, but a drug that's been used widely for the treatment of osteoporosis, particularly in older ladies, called denosumab, they think will have a significant effect in reducing breast cancer in women with a BRCA1 gene fault. The other thing that we're looking at is whether or not taking aspirin might reduce the risk of abnormalities occurring in the fallopian tube that could develop into cancer. So there's some really exciting things that we're talking to our ladies about that might help reduce their risk.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I'm sure we can all take something very valuable from what you have shared with us, and we are truly privileged to have had you speak today.
Our second guest, Andrea Eliastam, is a beloved Moriah parent and community member who is now going to tell us her brave breast cancer story. We're extremely thankful for you taking the time out of your busy day to sit with us and share your time generously.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Eliastam, and I'm truly grateful to be speaking at this year's Pink Breakfast. I'll never forget the day of my diagnosis. I was shopping, where else, and my gynae called to say, "Look, we found something that needs to be checked further. Why don't we do a biopsy tomorrow?" You already know when they squeeze you into the emergency spot that things don't necessarily look good. I knew I didn't have breast cancer. I was only 42 years old with no family history and a mammogram 10 months prior, which was clear. Of course, it was cancer, else I wouldn't be here speaking to you. The words of the doctor still thud to the beat of my pounding heart when I think of that day that changed my life forever. I have been through cancer twice, and both times my mammogram was clear. I do not have the Brca gene. Please, ladies, when you do your checks, do your ultrasound and mammogram together. Today, however, I don't want to focus on my breast cancer journey, but rather on what I learned and what I can hopefully teach you today. Hashem chose for me to learn many life lessons through breast cancer. Along my journey, I was given the book God Winked by Sarah Yocheved Rigler, and in it I found this message which explained my what. What am I meant to learn from this? What do I need to change in myself? The words of the book kept resonating. Everything I need, I have. And everything I have, I need. The breasts are the organs of nurture. The cancer was a blockage. I was being upgraded to the fast lane in learning to appreciate and love myself. I'm a giver, like so many women naturally are, looking after everyone but themselves. The cancer was a wake-up call. I learned the meaning of really seeing the world clearly for the first time. I sucked up everything around me: noise, smells, sounds, life. When I was diagnosed again 3 years later, I realized that instead of thriving, I was actually living from checkup to checkup, putting my life on hold. So a year after I'd healed, I left corporate optometry to give my time to helping homeless, disadvantaged, and outreach services via my own business, Vision Van Mobile Optometry, which brings me joy every day. I started thinking of a future, not looking for the next cancer. I'm 4 years clear so far, and I'm living for today. I was given some questions to answer today. The first one: what do you or don't you say to someone who has breast cancer or any cancers? I'll share what someone said to me as what not to say. How does it feel facing your own mortality? Rather just say, I'm here for you, or can I vacuum or do your washing? Because let's face it, we can't do that for a while. Community support and asking for help was one of my toughest lessons to learn. Even standing here, sharing today is difficult. The best thing you can do for any person is just be there for them. The school was amazing. The Chesed program, the tuck shop, for my kids, the psychologists. I'm truly grateful. It made such a huge difference to our lives. Question 2, how to keep a positive mindset. This word, positive, we hear a lot going through our treatment, and we hate it a lot. Be real. We aren't as strong as you keep telling us we are. And yes, even though you say, I couldn't do it, if you had to, you would do the same. One foot in front of the other. That's literally what I did in autopilot to get through it all. Question 3, how do you support people in the community or family of the breast cancer patient? I've covered that above. Just be present. Remember, it's hard for our children too, so explain to your children that their friend's mum is sick and show them how to be kind and supportive. I once again was so lucky that my children had amazing friends and community, and I thank my community. I'm conscious of the fact that young girls are hopefully listening today. And to you, my kids are going to hate me, I say, love your boobies. Every day in the shower, get to know how they look, how they feel, and make it a habit to check them every so often. Learn to love yourselves and your bodies from top to toe. Work on finding inner peace. Value every single day. We have so much power in helping our bodies either fight those cells or succumb to them. Genes can't always be changed, but their outcomes can. Look after body, mind, and soul, and your bodies will look after you. Thank you so much for your time today. Look after yourselves and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing your very personal story and strong messages for all of us to have a greater awareness.
Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We are very lucky to have still been able to spread breast cancer awareness in such different times, and are beyond lucky to have raised money for National Breast Cancer Australia and Breast Cancer Network Australia. For many years, this event has had such a great impact on women in our community, and together we must continue to empower and inspire one another in advocating for causes that matter.
We would like to extend a big thank you to Yvette and Amy for taking time out of their busy weeks to create an online pink breakfast, which for years to come will continue uniting women in our community for such an amazing cause. Also, thank you to Miss Cases, who never fails to make every pink breakfast unforgettable through her continued support and mentoring. You are amazing.
To bring the food aspect into this online event, we are extremely lucky to have our Year 12 baker, Cassie Bobrow, with us to share her tips on how to perfectly ice cupcakes. We are really looking forward to seeing the amazing creations you make, Cassie, and thank you for being our special guest.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassie, and today I'm going to teach you my tips and tricks on piping onto mini cupcakes. First, you'll choose your flour tip and put it into a piping bag, and then you'll put your pink frosting into the bag. Once the icing is in the bag, make sure to twist it and squeeze out any air bubbles so that it doesn't pop in the middle of your icing. Start off in the center, give a little bit of a push, go around, keep going until you reach the beginning and done. Now that we're done piping the roses, one of my favorite things to do is add a little bit of edible glitter for some sparkle. So what I usually do is I take the edible glitter and I pour some out onto the spoon, because if I pour it straight onto the cupcakes, they'll usually come out in a clump. And then I just grab my fingers and I pinch together a little bit and I just drizzle it over. And here is the end result. It is a great activity to do with all mothers, aunties, grannies, sisters, and all female figures in your life. It is super quick and fun, easy, and tastes delicious. And I can't wait to see all your creations. Be sure to tag me on Instagram at cakesbycassie_.
A huge thank you to Cassie. We can definitely take some tips and tricks away to share with our families and create some delicious looking treats in the comfort of our own homes.
Also, a big thank you to our generous prize donors for their generosity, as we understand the hardships associated with owning a business during these difficult times. Keep a lookout on the email you use to buy the tickets to the event, as we will now draw the raffles, and those lucky winners of some incredible prizes will be emailed. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today.
And we hope to see you next year in person at the Pink Breakfast 2021.